can if you're going to move around, or it can stay right there.
Okay.
All right, please give a warm hand to Charlie.
All right, I'm Charlie Keeler, and this is Political Polarization Through U.S. Media. To start, by show of hands, who recognizes these two people? That's good. That's a lot of people. So on the left, for those of you that don't know, is former President Richard Nixon, and on the right is former President John F. Kennedy. And this was taken at the first televised presidential debate, in which both candidates enumerated the positive qualities of the other's character, which is important. Flash forward 65 years, and the state of said debates has changed drastically, and not for the better. Not only has the format in which individuals can view debates changed, but also nearly all facets of the mode of exposure to political ideals. From 24-hour news networks like Fox News and MSNBC to Twitter and Instagram, nearly all political news is now digital. Even reliable newspapers such as the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times went digital to ensure the accessibility of their product. But this accessibility, as we will see, comes with a price. Furthermore, the vast majority of individuals own and operate a social media account through which trillions of posts circulate each day, each having a small piece of information or content. Within much of this content lies political information. Shown by either videos of speeches, videos of people voicing their opinions, traditional text posts, and even political memes, which I'm sure you're well aware of. Unfortunately, it is inevitable that people will gain some form of political information from this, and some of it will obviously be false. So why study it? It's clear that the technological revolution is unstoppable. And may even be beneficial to society. For me, the answer to this question lies in a trip my family took to Washington, D.C. when I was a child. While walking along the mall, we were confronted by angry protesters during the March for Life, with signs filled with flames and threats of hell. Simply put, I wondered why. And as I grew up with the threats of the angry protesters in my mind, my family put a stress on practicing civilized dialectics when discussing political ideas. This stress, coupled with my experiences, spurred a curiosity for the motivation behind such political anger and such political passion. This curiosity led to my initial research question: how has the evolution of U.S. political journalism in the field of social media shifted political polarization and societal division? To investigate said question, a review of the current literature was necessary. 3 main studies arose in my review of the literature, the first being Rise of Political Polarization by Rachel Kleinfeld and her colleagues. It studies how political polarization has increased since the early 1960s drastically. Kleinfeld uses numerical evidence and draws on the digital revolution as an exacerbating factor. The second, done by Conover and his colleagues, titled Polarization on Twitter, uses complex network clustering algorithms to discuss the political motivations on Twitter using intensely complex statistical analysis. Network clustering identifies groups in a community and is often used to identify interest groups by politicians. And the third was Partisan Gaps in Political Information Seeking by Peterson and Iyengar, both of Texas A&M and Stanford University, respectively. And it discusses the different types of political information that circulates on social media and effectively differentiates between motivated reasoning and political cheerleading using the number of retweets. This review of the current research led to my gap in the knowledge. Few studies really examined the sentiment behind each political message on Twitter specifically, and no existing studies used any sort of hashtag as an indicator, and I wondered whether that played a part in the severity of the political message and its reach. This led to my revised research question: how has the evolution of political journalism in the field of social media associated with the prevalence and accessibility of political hashtags and coupled with the transmission of sentiment through tweets shifted political polarization and societal division? My method was honestly quite simple, though difficult to find. I found an algorithm entitled TweetBinder in which you could put a hashtag into, and it would spit out a comprehensive report on the last 200 tweets collected in any given period of time. It gave me the economic value of each tweet and the sentiment score of each tweet, which is really important, as well as a broken down analysis of what that sentiment meant in percentages of positive, negative, neutral, and undefined. The hashtags I used were hashtag conservative, hashtag liberal, hashtag Trump, and hashtag Biden. Hashtag conservative and hashtag liberal were used namely because they were the overarching foundation of the two prevalent political ideologies in America. And hashtag Trump and hashtag Biden were added later to add complexity and see whether current events may play a part in the sentiment that was imparted onto users. And again, the sentiment score was the main statistic that was important in this study, as well as the potential reach and the number of impressions that each tweet had. So the number of potential users that could have saw said tweet. My projected results were a uniform trend. So as the tweet and the idea passed from the contributor to the post and then it made an impression in each viewer, the amount of charged sentiment, so either positive or negative sentiment, would increase. And that was my hypothesis. The results were much more complicated, though. This represents a broken down sentiment score of the hashtag conservative side, in which a score of 51.32 was reported, which means it was slightly neutral because the sentiment score is a number from 1 to 100. Then the report was able to break down the percentage of charged sentiment and undefined sentiment within that report. And you can clearly see sentiment that is charged is either in baby blue or sort of dark blue, and its area in the pie chart steadily increases as the message moves from contributor to post and to impression, which was congruent with my hypothesis. On the liberal side, things were a little more complicated, though. The sentiment score was slightly higher. I'm not sure if that could have been due to current events or other factors. But in the breakdown, the message as it went from contributor to post increased in charged sentiment, but as it went towards an impression in the user, that actually decreased, which was against my hypothesis, and could have been, again, due to any sort of current events that took place that day. And to attempt to differentiate between what was happening each day that the statistics were reported, I took reports from the morning and the afternoon to try and mitigate that skew. And there was not a significant difference in overall sentiment scores between the average of Republican and conservative, or conservative and liberal ideologies across the morning and afternoon, which was good. And it meant the study was accurate. an analysis of the trends after connecting this could have been broken down. As you can see on the right, or my right, your left, is the report for #liberal, and it steadily increases in charge sentiment as the message goes through. But the hang-up and the outlier was that of the report about #Biden that sharply decreases after the post attempts to make an impression on the viewer. On the conservative side, it was much more uniform and conformed with my initial hypothesis. On the #conservative side, there's a very steep increase, and on the #Trump side, it's slightly more gradual, but it is a uniform increase nonetheless. Before making conclusions, it's really necessary to talk about the limitations of this. TweetBinder has a paywall, and as a high school student, I was unable to afford it as it was $200 per tweet if I wanted any more than 200 tweets, which made my sample size quite small. I was only able to collect 1,600 tweets, and as I stated before, there are millions that circulate each day, so that was a significant setback in analyzing the possible trends. Furthermore, a high level of statistics was needed to even begin to interpret the review of the literature, for which I thank my mentor, Dr. Snodgrass. He cannot be here today, but the network clustering algorithms of Conover's study were at a graduate level, which was very difficult for me to understand, so that was necessary. And in terms of recommendations for future researchers, I would stick to having a larger sample size because that was definitely instrumental in impacting my research. To draw a conclusion, I need to revert back to Kleinfeld's definition of polarization, in which he states, polarization is the study as the transmission of emotion and politically charged ideas. It's the transmission of emotion and politically charged ideas. An increase in polarization means that the emotions that people transmit are more contentious and the political ideas become more separated. The results show an increase of emotionally charged political ideas as a message is transmitted from individual to individual, and this aligns with the Kleinfeld definition, showing that political polarization is in fact increasing. The audience, however, is far more massive. Far different from a radio or newspaper, millions of people have millions of venues to impart their emotional polarization, a result of social media. The connection is therefore clear. The audience allows for a transmission of politically and emotionally charged messages on a far greater scale, which in turn increases polarization. And these are my sources. Any questions? So the sentiment score was a rating from 0 to 100 that described how neutral or positive or negative that set of tweets was. So if a report had a sentiment score of 0, it was classified as very, very negative. And if it had a sentiment score of 100, it was very, very positive. Since I took these reports on random days throughout the week to try and alleviate the possibility of skew due to current events, the sentiment scores were fairly neutral. So. Some bias? Yes. I think that's true. I think Twitter is a very large social media platform, though, and so the sheer number of users could have alleviated that. Yeah, but definitely a little bit. What it means is that as someone posts something on social media, when someone sees that, they get a positive or negative view imparted like subconsciously. So no. Yeah.
Did you look into the role of social media algorithms, like the intentional viewership of posts and that impact on polarization?
I did not, but that sounds like something that future researchers should do, because I didn't have the resources or knowledge of like computer programming to dive into that, but it's definitely impacting the results.
How did you choose the hashtags and why the solely?
I only did those because they were the most overarching, right? It would have taken, there was a limit on the amount of reports that I could actually use without paying a lot of money. And so that played into it. And they were the most general, but informative at the same time that I could find. And also, Conover touches on it in his study, political polarization on Twitter. And so I also drew a lot of my methods from there. Thanks.